And an important thing that's missing from this slide that you see is security. With the libraries, you have extremely granular security. I mean, you can set up who can view documents, who can approve, who can edit, who has access to the library even. You can even go crazy where you can set up item level security, meaning per document you can set up specific roles and who has access to that document. So that can be, it's useful in certain cases, like web pages when you do a page library, but it may not be useful in certain other cases. So you have to be very careful when you set up item level security as well. And of course, the library support workflows. Essentially with workflows, you can automate anything, any action. Very simple, basic actions like approve a document or route a document or write something somewhere to fairly complex software packages in and of itself. I mean, with a particular action in this workflow, you can really pretty much pull information from an external source inside, pump data out. I mean, you can do a variety of things. They're extremely powerful tools. We talked about the library. Let's talk about the list. What really is a list? Lists are extremely powerful as well, and anything that can be described in a few columns or in a few fields can be made into a list. Let's talk about, for example, if you manage a real-life example here. We had a client of ours who managed the product information, right? They managed the potency, solubility, cleaning difficulty of all of their products in a spreadsheet. It was a large spreadsheet, fairly difficult to manage. Now, this can easily be converted into a list. What are the advantages? Better audit trail. Each library and list has audit trail built in already, and there's version control, better security, more granular security. So it definitely helps in that kind of a scenario. You can even convert simple access databases to, so for example, you have an access database to manage assets with like 4 or 5 tables. You can easily convert those transpose that into a bunch of lists which are interconnected and still serve the same purpose. There's a variety of built-in lists as well, like calendars, contacts, linked lists, announcements, which serve to be pretty powerful tools in your overall business process automation initiative. Pretty much the same rules apply as the library. I mean, here we've divorced ourselves from the document, but this is just essentially a slew of metadata. So the same thing, workflows, security, versioning, the powerful columns, and all of that hold good. Excuse me. And my throat is a little dry here today. A very important aspect of it is of SharePoint is that the CD underbelly or the tech speak really is that Microsoft has exposed the entire object model of SharePoint, right? So you can pretty much manipulate and use the lists, the libraries, the sites in any which way you want. So you can trigger scripts based on events. An event is like item adding, meaning I'm adding a new item to the list. So before I add it, I want you to run this .NET script or this .NET assembly to perform certain activities. And once you add it, you can run another script called that's triggered after the item added event, right? So item is added. Oh, why don't you write a transaction into an audit trail list, which is separate, which has the date, time, transaction, who did it, when, reason for doing it, and so on and so forth. So those can be extremely powerful. For instance, you have a user list, and before somebody deletes something, you really want to go through 2 or 3 checkpoints where before the user is actually deleted from that list, it goes to to the HR manager. They have to approve it, and certain other activities have to happen. You can actually trigger that through that particular process as well. So essentially, a pretty powerful tool to programmatically automate your business process. Excuse me. Of course, eventually you have to present all of this information in some form of a GUI, and essentially all of these libraries and lists and the information that's stored are rendered on web pages, and within these web pages are web parts, and the web parts have pull up relevant information that you need from the underlying SharePoint lists and libraries, or from external sources as well. So there are these out-of-the-box SharePoint web parts. There are also additional web parts that you can pick out of SharePoint Designer, like data views, which can be extremely useful and powerful as well. Or of course, you can custom build the web parts to pretty much do what you want. Again, excuse me. Again, since the entire object model is exposed, you can manipulate and render pretty much anything on these web pages. So all of these lists, pages, libraries reside within a site, which can belong to a site collection, and in turn belong to a web application. And I'm not going to get into a lot of details here, but it's useful to know that each individual web application can be segregated from other web applications. I think that's very critical information to have. So, for example, you can keep your validated instances or your validated web apps, or validated applications as part of one or two web apps, and your non-validated stuff as part of another web app. So if you have got a control for validation and change control perspective and configuration management. And each web application has its own content store, basically its own content database where all of the content is stored and managed. So those are distinct advantages of having these web applications. Furthermore, there's the form server. The form server enables you to render these InfoPath forms. If you recall, a couple of slides ago, I talked to you about forms libraries. Now, you can actually render InfoPath forms on the web without a client desktop or a laptop having InfoPath on it. There are some limitations, of course, but it further enhances the overall automation capability of these forms. In our industry, we have a lot of paper, and excuse me. I'm really, really hoarse today. In our industry, we have a lot of paper, so if we can build feature-rich forms and put that data up on a website for people to enter, it's really, really useful. The business data catalog is one of SharePoint shared services that essentially allows you to integrate back-end line of business systems, like your ERP or whatever, with SharePoint. So using the BDC or the business data catalog, you can pull data from other databases or other services and have that information show up in lists or web parts or search results or user profiles or within your application that you built within SharePoint. And this integration is fairly straightforward enough to do. You can essentially describe the data using like an XML data file, metadata file, and then the BDC does all of the operations necessary to get that information into SharePoint. So that can be really, really powerful, especially when you're trying to integrate your application with some other back-end applications or your business applications like your ERP systems or your external HR software or whatever it is. And lastly, features. Features are really the backbone of SharePoint development, because essentially it's good programming practice to manage all of your custom development with features and deploy them as features. And these features can be deployed at a site-by-site level, and it can really the features can give you tremendous control over the overall configuration of SharePoint as well as the capabilities of SharePoint. The workflows are a special type of features, essentially, and you can start a series of operations like approval operations or review operations, or manually, meaning I trigger this workflow for this particular item, or automatically saying, hey, okay, I checked in this document, now trigger this workflow automatically. Or whenever I say hit approve, it should automatically do something. And like I mentioned earlier, the workflows can be really simple or can be extremely powerful applications in their own right. So do the features.